Bitch, I don't know what happened. I just got really nauseous out of nowhere. Like, really fucking nauseous. Can you get nauseous from too much garlic? This is crazy. I keep making myself... All of a sudden, I'm developing all of these, like, allergies. I eat too much pistachio, I throw up. Now it's looking like if I consume too much garlic in a day, I'm gonna get nauseous. We're gonna do everything we can so we don't throw up. I hate throwing up. I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. That you? There was no answer. I snapped on my lamp. The hands of my bedside clock stood at 5. I waited for Fred to appear for a telltale flush from the bathroom. Nothing. I threw on a robe and went to investigate. Except for a faint glimmering, through the sky, the bathroom was dark. Penny padded after me sleepily as I retraced my steps, went down the hall and into the bedroom. I struck a match. Fred lay on his back, mouth open, hands flung over his head. It was plain to see he had not stirred in quite some time. The night was mild, yet I felt chilled to the marrow, chilled to the bone. I went through the tower room into the kitchen, put the pot up for coffee, and laid a fire in the little coal grate adjacent. This was a grand guignol. I'm gonna have to look some of these words up. Punch would pop up at any moment and cobbler over me the head with a broomstick. Outside, it was still dark. I felt acutely lonely. Cutting off... I'm going to cancel that. Felt acutely lonely, cut off from my usual channels of communication. I needed someone to talk to on a level I had never even touched before. Save for an old wives' tale or a contrived horror flick. Someone who had a frame of reference into which I could fit the frightening things that were happening to me. Puking up in public the nitty-gritty of one's neurosis to whoever was disturbed enough to listen unpaid was practically de rigueur. The cocktail hour was salted with sexual hang-ups, and there was a mass confessional being held in the land. Everybody talked about everything, but to whom could I talk about ghosts? When there weren't supposed to be any. Yet virtually every religion from the time man first conceived of himself has something more than an awkward accident in the universe offered a spiritual budget plan. Die now, live later. Life after death or an eternal life. The same difference. Islam, Buddhism, Tao, Shinto, they all smiled inscrutably and looked to the heavens. Judaism, Christianity, and their twice told tales of an even more fanciful fabric backed off woolly-eyed at the faintest proof that what they had been preaching was true. Now I, a product of woodsy Western thought, though I'd never brought any of it in ritualized form, I too was backing off. But from what? A phantom in the night? A natural phenomenon? Or my own clammy ignorance? At dawn, the jays who nested in the back gardens began to shrill. I wanted to scream with them. I almost did when I heard footsteps in the hall again, but this time it was Fred. How'd you do? Hey, what are you doing up so early on a Sunday morning? Couldn't sleep, I said curtly. Want some coffee? Sure, might as well take advantage of your insomnia. May never happen again. Oh, but it may, I thought darkly. God help me, it may. Over seconds, I eyed him with resentment. He looked fresh and rested, while I had all I could do to keep, while I could do to keep my teeth from clattering against the rim of the cup. Fred, did you get up earlier this morning to go to the bathroom? No, I slept like the dead. Don't use that expression, I snapped. He lit 2 cigarettes, passing in passing mine on, and in passing mine on, there was not the customary squeeze play that signaled love and understanding. So what's the matter with you? He asked quietly. There were footsteps in the hall around 5, and don't tell me I was imagining them. I added defensively because Penny heard them too. In fact, she woke me up to tell me. We're not the only people who live here, you know. This is an old house. Jan sounds carry. Floorboards creak. And birds fly over the moon, I thought sourly. It was useless trying to reach him. I really was alone in this, and yet even worse than being alone was the thought that I was not. Anyway, if you slept in the bedroom where you belong, he went on unpleasantly, you wouldn't be lying awake half the night, listening for sounds. No, I shot back, I'd be lying awake listening to you moan while a nightmare nip nonsense chased you through the jungle. That didn't help. Fred had served in the Pacific, the Philippines. The memory of those hideous 4 years still stalked through his subconscious. So he's a war veteran. He had contracted a fever, and the recruiting bouts was why I had bought the Reclaimer and slept on it so often. Sorry for that, I mumbled. He didn't even bother to answer, but later in the day, unexpectedly, he said, you know, they've got a big dog next door, and these partitions are as thin as tissue. Did you ever stop to think that maybe the dog prowls around at night? I hadn't considered that. It seemed too absurd, but it was a straw, and I needed something to cling to. Come on, sweetie, snap out of it. There's a good film at Waverly. Why don't we go see it and have dinner afterwards? Glad to escape the apartment for a few hours, I assented. Far from being good, the film was unbearably dull. Full of cordial pratfalls and couplings that grew as monotonous as hiccups. The only appetite it aroused in us was for linguine with clam sauce. We left them in the middle and went to an Indian restaurant on West 4th Street. After dinner, I felt considerably cheered. As we strolled home, arms linked through the crooked streets of the village, I made up my mind to speak with our neighbors. The opportunity presented itself when I went down to check on the mail the following afternoon and found that the postman had deposited a letter addressed to them in our box. I seized on it eagerly, but back on the tiny landing, my nerve began to fizzle out like old soda pop. Our neighbor's door was directly opposite our own, scarcely 3 feet separating us, yet it might as well have been the Great Barrier Reef. We had no contact with them outside of chance encounters on the stairway, which, though friendly enough, were guarded from the sharp smell of turpentine and linseed oil permeating the upper hall. I had guessed they were artists even before I saw the blank canvases propped against the iron ladder. It was an unsightly thing, that ladder, painted a battleship gray. It ran up against the narrow wall separating our apartments to a wooden trapdoor overhead, which gave access to the roof. One evening, after huffing and puffing up 4 flights of stairs, Fred had made a great joke of it by continuing on up the rungs. When I opened the door, I found him hanging from the top, grinning waggishly. As I leaned against it now, I had almost decided to flip the errant letter under the door when Darius set up, a suspicious snuffling around its edges. My presence was prim. The straw to which I had been clinging was about to be tested in the wind. I knocked gingerly. R flung the door open. She was in an old work shirt and jeans, so stiff with paint they looked starched. "Oh, hi," she said casually. "Hi, this was in my box. I hope it isn't a bill." "Probably is." She took it and tossed it carelessly onto the pile of similar envelopes. There was irritation in the gesture. Once again, I felt the intruder. "If you've got a few minutes, I'd like to talk to you. How about coming in for coffee?" "Can't. I'm expecting a phone call." "Come on in here and I'll make some." Good enough. I forced myself to sound as casual as she. Darius, looking formidable, inspected my feet. I patted his broad boxer skull, the dog, and stepped around him into a vast studio flooded with north light. From pitch skylight to baseboard, it was hung with abstract paintings. Their bright jangling colors created a sort of static in the room, a kinetic, unbridled, nervous energy that set me on edge. One canvas in particular looked like a bleeding ulcer. If Darius did pace at night, small wonder. R brought lukewarm coffee in chipped china mugs, and we made small talk while Darius slobbered over my hands. "He's a big one," I exclaimed. "I should think he'd get awfully restless cooped up in an apartment so much." "He's used to it." "But at night," I persisted, "does he prowl about?" "Why would he?" R looked at me oddly. "We keep the bedroom door closed and he sleeps beside us on his mat." Her manner grew cool as the coffee. Her manner grew as cool as the coffee. I was miserably conscious of making a mess of it. "I know, he barks a lot when we're out, and I'm sorry if he disturbs you," she said distantly. "But really, we aren't gone often enough." "Oh no, it isn't that," I demurmured. "It's, well, you see, at night I thought possibly." At that moment, the phone rang and R dashed into another room. I waited, feeling foolish, but at least I had been spared an explanation that could only have caused further embarrassment. When after a few minutes she continued to talk on the phone, I called out, "Thanks loads for the coffee," and fled into my own apartment. It was getting dark earlier now. With a pounding heart, I went from room to room, turning on all the lamps. "You're making Con Ed richer, but you're not shedding any light on a real problem," I told myself. In the bright spill of the rooms, I looked as they always did. Somewhat Dickinson, newly vibrant with the color I had lavished upon them. Yet in the corners lurked a darkness no arc of lamplight could dispel. As I stared into it uneasily, it seemed to gather densely and advance towards me, a palpable presence. I was face to face with the unseen. Should I keep going? A little bit more. We got a little bit of time. In occult circles, there is a saying: if you feel it, it is there. It was there, and like an ancient mariner, that on a lonesome road doth walk in fear and dread, and having once turned around walks on and turns no more his head, because he knows a frightful friend doth close behind him. I went through my days from Charybdis. I fell into Scylla. When Penny had her seizure, it came on her savagely for the first time in over a year, filling me with guilt as I realized that in absorption with my anxieties, I had neglected the medication she required. Added to my remorse was the pang of facing that she was almost 9 years old. Bright Penny, girl of ballad, called formerly Penelope, and whimsically Munchkin, Pumpkin, and Tinkanini was the light of my life, a light that was continually threatening to go out. Penny was epileptic. A nip of brandy and Datalin eased her out of the fit this time, but I wonder how many more times I could stave off the heartbreak that hung over me. I began to brood. The love between us was as strong as she was continually frail. Life without her was inconceivable. In my anguish, I remembered a book I'd heard of some time before. I'd had no need of it then, but the memory had apparently rooted itself in my subconscious. For now it sprang sharp and clear to mind. When Your Animal Dies by Sylvia Barbanel. I had to have it. I phoned to Samuel Weiser's, a bookstore nearby specializing in esoterica, the occult, parapsychology and astrology, subjects I had eschewed before, considering them the province of the hysterical, or at best the hopelessly ingenuous. Yes, they knew the book. It was published in London. No, it was not in stock, but they were expecting a shipment shortly. I left my name and telephone number. When they called a week later, I was bedded with a virus and could not pick it up. Gratefully, I accepted their offer to send it over to me. We're going to end this here because my son is in here getting into stuff.